Isaac didn't notice the world shifting. He was too busy learning. Every spare minute, after homework, after cleaning, after walking Mrs. Bell's 3 yappy dogs for $5, went into that laptop. YouTube tutorials, free courses, bootleg PDFs. He learned HTML, then JavaScript, then Python. He didn't know anyone else who could code, but it didn't matter. The computer was both mentor and mirror, reflecting every mistake, rewarding every breakthrough. By 15, he was building websites for local barbers and bodegas. $10 here, $20 there. It wasn't much, but it was his. No begging, no handouts, just earned. By 16, he had a PayPal account and a dream. But it wasn't just about money. It was about control, about not having to depend on people who looked down on him, about proving that brilliance could come from cracked sidewalks and food stamp lines. Then came the letter. The city ran a tech boot camp scholarship, 3 months of intensive training with mentorship from professionals. Isaac wasn't going to apply. He knew how those things worked. They picked the kids from magnet schools, the ones who had clean shoes and 2 parents and portfolios printed on ivory paper. But Miss Larkin had already submitted his application. She pulled him aside after class and smiled like she'd done something illegal. "You're getting out," she said. He didn't believe it. Not until the acceptance email came. Not until he stepped onto that clean campus in uptown Manhattan and saw, for the first time, what resources looked like when they weren't rationed. There were glass walls and dual-monitor workstations, free snacks that didn't expire in a week, mentors who actually listened, and students who mostly didn't look like him. Some looked through him. Some smiled with lips only. But the code didn't care. So he kept coding. By 18, he was freelancing for startups. By 20, he launched a small app that helped bodegas track delivery stock. A venture fund noticed. They offered seed money. He moved to New York, rented a studio apartment in Harlem, worked 16-hour days, failed 3 startups, burned through the seed money, ate cheap ramen again like it was a sacred ritual. And then it happened. The 4th idea. A logistics algorithm for independent couriers worked. It didn't just work, it scaled. Cities wanted it. Companies licensed it. His face was in Fast Company. And Forbes called him a visionary from the forgotten zip code. But with success came shadows. Old friends started calling, not to reconnect, but to borrow, to pitch, to guilt. Strangers showed up with smiles too wide, questions too personal. Girls flirted with him before asking what kind of car he drove. At first, he was flattered, then exhausted. Because no one ever asked about Clarice, or Miss Larkin, or the nights he spent crying from hunger or anger or both. They saw the suit, the penthouse, the nameplate, but not the boy who used to watch the neighborhood burn through a cracked window. By 28, Isaac Cohn was a millionaire, technically a CEO, emotionally a ghost. His mother was gone now, passed in her sleep, finally free from bleach and bone ache. He bought her a headstone so polished it reflected the sky. Still, he was alone. Even at charity galas, even on tech panels, even at rooftop parties with influencers and champagne flutes. Alone. So one night, not planned, not scheduled, he packed a duffel bag, left the penthouse, disappeared from social media. hired a manager to run the company, took only cash, and moved to a small, tired town. In upstate New York, no one there knew him. That's how he liked it. He got a job at a hardware store, rented a room over a diner, bought jeans without logos, let his facial hair grow, called himself Zeke. He wasn't there to impress. He was there to feel again. The first morning in Fairbridge was cold and smelled like burnt coffee. Isaac, now Zeke, stood outside the hardware store 10 minutes before opening, hands jammed into the pockets of a coat too thin for the weather. The store was old, a family business passed down for generations, with creaky wooden floors and an old radio that only played classic rock. Hank, the owner, was a wiry white man in his 60s, with nicotine-stained fingers and a habit of calling everyone kid. "You knew?" Hank asked, squinting through the morning haze. Zeke nodded. "Yeah, just moved in." "Ever worked a register?" Zeke shook his head. "You'll learn." That was the interview. He started that day. It was the kind of job where people didn't ask where you came from as long as you showed up on time and didn't steal. Zeke liked that. He stocked shelves, swept floors, and loaded bags of mulch into pickup trucks. His muscles ached in a way they hadn't in years. Honestly, it felt good. He didn't have to pretend to be brilliant. No meetings, no TED Talks, no cameras. The town itself was sleepy, mostly white and mostly indifferent. A few people gave him double takes. He was one of the only black men in town, but no one said anything. He kept his head down, his voice soft, his movements deliberate. He didn't want attention. Not here. His evenings were spent in his rented room above the diner. Mrs. Mahoney, the owner, was a widow who gave him extra food whenever he looked too thin. She didn't ask questions either, though she did call him dear in that vaguely maternal way old women sometimes do when they sense grief in your bones. Days bled into weeks. And then he met her. Her name was Riley. She came into the store one rainy Tuesday, arguing on the phone about roofing materials. She was soaked, frustrated, and beautiful in a way that wasn't showy. Dark curls pulled into a bun, jeans with paint stains, boots that looked like they'd seen real labor. She ran a small home restoration business, mostly flipping old houses in town. She needed tools, supplies, lumber. Zeke helped her carry everything to her truck. "You knew?" she asked, sliding a soggy clipboard into her glove compartment. He nodded. "Just a few weeks." "You from the city?" Zeke hesitated. "You could say that." She didn't push. "Name's Riley." "Zeke." She offered a gloved hand. He took it. Her shake was firm. No nonsense. He liked that. They didn't exchange numbers. She just said, "See you around," and drove off, taillights disappearing into the mist. But she came back. The second time, she brought a thermos of coffee. "Figured you needed it more than me," she said. The third time, she asked what kind of music he liked. The fourth, she stayed 20 minutes after closing and helped him organize screws by size. Something began to form. Not fast, not dramatic, but real. She didn't ask about money, didn't ask what car he drove, what condo he lived in, or what he used to be. She only asked what he thought about the shape of window trims, about the kind of tree that grew outside the diner, about whether he liked thunderstorms. And Zeke, for the first time in years, didn't feel like a mark. He felt seen. But with connection came fear, because lies, even small ones, have sharp edges. Every time she laughed at one of his bad jokes, he felt guilt prick his ribs. Every time she called him Zeke, he wondered what she'd do if she knew his real name, if she knew that he was the man behind a multi-million-dollar company, that his face had once graced a Forbes cover, that he had employees, stockholders, and a board of directors waiting for his return. But if he told her, would she still smile the same way? Or would she see dollar signs? So he stayed silent, and the days got heavier. One night, sitting on the diner rooftop with Riley, the stars spread like powdered sugar above them, she asked, "Why here?" He didn't answer immediately. "Why this town?" she pressed gently. "Why this life?" Zeke stared at the stars. "I was tired of noise, tired of pretending." She looked at him, eyes softer than he deserved. "Then I'm glad you came." He almost told her then. Almost. But fear held him back. Because betrayal doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes it looks like love, until you realize it was always reaching for your wallet. And Zeke? He wasn't sure he could survive another betrayal. The sun filtered through the curtains of the modest apartment above Joe's cafe. Zacchiel stretched in bed, his back cracking from the firmness of the old mattress. He sat up slowly, staring out the window at the quiet town beginning to stir. The pace here was different, slower, softer, but the stillness gave him too much room to think. He brewed a pot of black coffee and sat at the small table near the window. A notebook lay open before him, its pages filled with sketches, ideas, half-written thoughts, pages that might once have charted future acquisitions or business forecasts, now held musings about trust, vulnerability, and purpose. Joe knocked once before entering without waiting for a reply. "Morning, Zeke," she said, placing a warm plate of scrambled eggs and toast on the table. "Big day ahead?" Zacchiel smiled. Every day feels big in a small town. Joe chuckled, pouring herself a cup of coffee and taking the seat across from him. "You've got a good head on your shoulders. Folks like you, even if you're still a bit of a mystery." That made him pause. He wasn't used to being liked for no reason, no title, no money, just Zeke. At the hardware store, Mr. Gallows greeted him with a grunt and a nod. The old man wasn't warm, but he was fair. Zacchiel respected that. He sorted inventory, helped a teenager find the right nails for a school project, and stayed late to fix a shelf no one asked him to. Work came easy when expectations were low. There was something freeing about that. That afternoon, he passed by the library and saw Riley through the glass. She was helping an elderly man navigate a large print tablet, her voice patient and kind. She hadn't noticed him yet, but he stood still, watching the sunlight cast a glow on her curls. He hadn't told her anything real about himself, and yet he felt closer to her than anyone back in New York. When she finally looked up and caught his gaze, she smiled, and he felt something crack inside. Later that night, he sat on a park bench, a crumpled letter in his hands, one he'd written to his parents long ago, but never sent. He had no family left, no roots. Money had become a wall, not a bridge. He thought about all the people who had claimed to love him when he'd become someone. He remembered women who whispered sweet nothings until the prenup was mentioned, friends who vanished the moment the IPO dipped, and the one assistant who'd confessed he was only inspired by Zacchiel's bank account. Now, here in this quiet place, he wondered what would happen if he never told anyone who he really was. Would he still be respected, trusted, loved? The bench creaked as someone sat beside him. It was Riley, her arms folded across her lap. "You okay?" she asked. He hesitated, then nodded. "Just thinking." "Dangerous pastime," she said with a soft smile. "You looked like your thoughts were winning." "They usually do," he admitted. She didn't pry. She just sat with him in the silence, and it felt like the most honest moment he'd had in years. The next day, Ezekiel volunteered at the community center. They were short-staffed, and someone needed to organize donated clothes. As he folded jackets and sorted shoes, a young boy named Malik approached him. "You knew?" the boy asked, squinting up at him. Ezekiel nodded. "Just moved here." "You talk different." "I guess I do." "You rich?" Ezekiel chuckled, surprised. "Do I look rich?" Malik studied his old work boots and worn hoodie. "No, that's why I'm asking." Ezekiel smiled. "I used to be. Now I'm just me." Malik considered this for a moment, then offered him a fist bump. "Cool, I like you." It was a small thing, but Ezekiel carried it with him like a treasure. That night, as he walked home, he passed a group of teenagers huddled outside the diner. They stared at him as he walked by, and one of them muttered a racial slur under his breath. Ezekiel stopped, turned. "What did you say?" The boy looked smug. "You heard me." Ezekiel didn't respond with anger. He just looked at the kid with a gaze so steady, it stripped away the boy's bravado. "You don't know me," he said quietly, "but you just showed me everything I need to know about you." He walked on, heart pounding, not from fear, but from the reminder that no amount of humility could make him invisible. Back in his room, he stood before the mirror. For the first time in weeks, he stared hard at himself. The mask of anonymity had started to wear thin. He missed his name, his company, his identity. But most of all, he missed being believed in. He thought of Riley's smile, Malik's fist bump, the silence on the bench. Maybe he didn't need to be believed in by everyone. Maybe just by one person. The next morning came with drizzle. Rain tapped gently against the window pane, a kind of rhythm that made the town feel even smaller. At the cafe, Joe asked him if he'd consider running a weekend book club for young men in the community. "They need someone to look up to," she said. "You've got presence." Ezekiel hesitated. "I'm not sure I'm who you think I am." Joe gave him a knowing smile. "You're exactly who they need." At the first session, 3 boys showed up. By the second week, there were 10. Ezekiel read with them, listened to their stories, offered thoughts when it mattered, and silence when it didn't. The kids were raw, brash, hopeful. They reminded him of himself at 15, before the suits, the skyline, and the broken trust. One night, after the group had left, Riley stayed behind to help him clean up. She looked over at him. He thought, brow furrowed. And she said, "I know what you mean, but I'm trying to change that." She nodded. "You don't have to tell me everything, Zeke. Just don't lie to me." He looked at her. Really looked. "I haven't lied," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "Just left some things out." Riley didn't flinch. "There's still time to fix that." That night, Ezekiel opened the notebook again. Only this time, instead of half-thoughts and fears, he wrote Riley's name. Under it, he wrote, "I want her to know the real me." He didn't know what the future held, whether she'd understand or walk away, but he knew he couldn't keep hiding. And maybe, just maybe, it was finally time to tell his story. The envelope sat on the kitchen table for 3 days before Ezekiel found the courage to open it. It was thick, embossed with his old company's logo in silver foil, an invitation to speak at a New York Tech Summit. "We'd love to have you share your journey," the letter read, "especially in light of your recent retreat from the spotlight." The irony cut deep. They wanted his voice now, when he'd finally found peace in silence. He slid the envelope aside. But the truth was clawing its way up from inside him. He'd been hiding in this town for months, telling half-truths and nodding politely when people assumed he was just another outsider looking for peace. That lie had protected him, but it had also shackled him. And Riley? She was the first person who made him want to tell the whole truth. But the closer they got, the harder it became to admit who he really was. That night, he sat across from her at Joe's cafe. Rain tapped the windows like nervous fingers. Joe served 2 bowls of chili, then disappeared to the back, knowing instinctively this wasn't a meal to be interrupted. "I need to tell you something," he said, stirring the spoon through his bowl without taking a bite. Riley folded her hands. "Okay. I haven't been honest. Not completely." She nodded. "I figured." That knocked the wind out of him. "You did?" Riley smiled gently. "Zeke, you carry the kind of silence that screams. You're careful with your words, like someone who's had them used against him." He looked down. "My real name is Ezekiel Moreau. I founded a tech firm in Manhattan. We hit unicorn status 5 years ago. I stepped down 8 months ago after everything collapsed." Riley didn't speak. She just watched him. "My company didn't collapse financially. It was me. I got tired of the people around me. Leeches, users, liars. I realized I had built an empire, but not a single soul I could trust." Riley's voice was quiet. "That's why you came here." He nodded. "I needed to remember who I was, without the money, the meetings, the headlines. I didn't expect to meet someone who made me want to stop hiding." Riley leaned back in her seat, eyes searching his. "I want to be angry," she admitted, "but I'm not. I'm hurt, a little, but not surprised." He met her gaze. "Why?" "Because the man you've been here, he's real, kind, present. That doesn't happen overnight. I just wish you'd trusted me sooner." "I didn't know how." Silence settled between them, soft and charged. Then Riley reached across the table and took his hand. "Thank you for telling me," she said. "But if you ever lie to me again, even by omission, we're done." He nodded, emotion catching in his throat. The truth was out, and it didn't destroy everything. That felt like a miracle. The next morning, the town woke to find Ezekiel Moreau trending on Twitter. Someone from the summit had leaked his tentative acceptance to the press. Articles spread like wildfire. Tech mogul hiding out in small-town Georgia? Paparazzi photos began surfacing. Old ones, mostly. But a few recent shots near the library, at the park, blurry and intrusive. Ezekiel stared at his phone, the weight of exposure crashing over him. Then came the knocks. Joe was first. "You okay, hun?" "I didn't mean for this to happen." "I know, but folks around here, they don't like secrets. You better tell them before they hear it from someone else." Riley came by next, her jaw tight. "Is this going to change things?" He shook his head. "Only if I let it." "Good," she said and kissed him lightly on the cheek. "Then don't let it." At the community center that afternoon, the boys in his book club were buzzing. "You're famous?" Malik demanded. "Like, for real?" "I used to be," Ezekiel said. "But fame didn't mean I was happy." One of the older boys frowned. "Why'd you lie?" "Because I thought if people knew who I was, they wouldn't treat me like a person, just a product." There was silence. Then Malik said, "You still gonna hang out with us?" Ezekiel smiled. "I'm not going anywhere." Cheers erupted, awkward but heartfelt. The town held its breath for 3 days. Then came the letters. handwritten notes left at his door, at the cafe, slipped between the pages of books in the library. One read, "We all have something we're not proud of. Thanks for staying." Another, "Your story matters, but your presence matters more." Joe hosted a town listening night where anyone could ask him anything. He stood under warm lights, not as a tech giant, but as a man. Someone asked about the stock scandal. He explained what happened, how partners tried to push him into shady deals, how he walked away instead. Another asked if he regretted leaving. He paused. "Not a day goes by that I don't miss the thrill, but for the first time, I don't miss myself." People clapped, not politely, earnestly, and afterward, as he walked home, hand in hand with Riley, he realized that telling the truth hadn't cost him his peace. It had made it real. The first message came in the form of an email. No greeting, no name, just a single line. "You can't hide from who you really are." Ezekiel stared at it for a long time, his fingers hovering above the keyboard, unsure whether to delete it or reply. Instead, he closed the laptop, but the words lingered. He had hoped the attention would die down after the initial flare, but the internet doesn't forget. News blogs kept churning out stories, speculating on why he'd disappeared. The headlines weren't vicious yet, but they buzzed like flies, reminding him of the world he left behind. And then came the real ghost, Miles Sinclair. They used to be partners, co-founders, brothers almost, until greed split the seams between them. Ezekiel walked away from the company. Miles doubled down. And now, apparently, Miles wanted to talk. A private jet landed 30 miles outside of town. He didn't go to meet Miles right away. Instead, he walked the streets of Halston, trying to breathe. The town that had once felt like a hiding place now seemed smaller under the weight of expectation. People smiled more nervously. Strangers pointed. He found Riley at the farmer's market, helping stack apples into crates. "You okay?" she asked, brushing a curl from her cheek. "They're here." Riley looked at him. "The press?" "No. Worse. Miles." She paused. "Do you want to see him?" He didn't answer. That night, he dreamt of New York. Flashing lights, champagne meetings, Miles grinning across a boardroom table as knives twisted behind his smile. The next morning, a black SUV rolled into Halston. Out stepped Miles, looking every bit the shark Ezekiel remembered. Sharp suit, $1,000 shoes, smile that didn't touch the eyes. Ezekiel met him at Joe's, the most neutral ground he could find. "Well, well," Miles said, sliding into the booth. "Didn't think I'd find you playing cowboy in the South." Ezekiel sipped his coffee. "Why are you here?" "Because you left a mess, brother, and I'm the one who's been cleaning it up." Ezekiel folded his arms. "I walked away. You didn't have to stay." "Didn't I?" Miles leaned forward. "You think you get to vanish and the consequences just evaporate?" "You mean your consequences," Ezekiel said quietly. Miles chuckled. "Don't get righteous now. You bailed. We built that company together. You can't rewrite history just because you found a charming girlfriend and a slower pace of life." Ezekiel clenched his jaw. "What do you want?" "A reunion." Miles smiled, but his eyes were icy. "We make a public appearance together. One press conference. Set the record straight. Show everyone that the Moreau name still means business. And then what?" "Then I walk away. You get your piece, I get my investors back." Ezekiel stared at him. "You're not here for reconciliation. You're here for leverage." Later that evening, Ezekiel stood on his porch, watching a thunderstorm roll in. Riley joined him, silent. "He wants a show," Ezekiel said. "One press conference, one fake handshake." "You gonna do it?" He didn't answer. She looked at him. Why does this feel like more than just a business favor? Because it is. He wants to rewrite the ending. Wants people to believe we're still a team. But we're not. Not after what he did. Riley nodded. Then don't do it. He sighed. But if I don't, you'll make sure the story ends his way anyway. 2 days later, Ezekiel stood under fluorescent lights in a rented conference room. Cameras clicked. Miles grinned beside him. Ezekiel delivered his lines like a ghost reading a script. They smiled. They shook hands. They answered hollow questions from reporters. Then it was over. As the camera shut down, Miles leaned in and whispered, "You still give good optics." Ezekiel didn't answer. Back in Halston, he sat with Riley under the stars. "I hated every second of that," he said, "but maybe now it's done." She took his hand. "It's never really done, but maybe it's the last time he gets to write your story." Ezekiel looked at her, grateful. Isaiah had never been more uncertain in his life. He'd built an empire in New York with steel nerves and sleepless ambition. But in this small southern town, with dusty streets and no skyline to touch, he was starting from scratch. His cover, Isaiah Clarke, broke drifter from Atlanta, just trying to earn a living, was holding. He worked long shifts at the hardware store and lived in a cramped room above a laundromat. No one recognized him. No one asked questions, which was exactly what he needed. The town had its rhythms, its unspoken rules. People nodded at each other on the street. Strangers held doors open. But trust was not given. It was slowly earned like rain smoothing stone. Isaiah began showing up early, staying late, helping anyone who needed it. He fixed an old lady's porch steps for free, replaced a neighbor's flat tire in the rain. Word spread. That Isaiah kid, he's solid. But Isaiah wasn't doing it for praise. He was watching, listening, searching for something real. At the diner, he met Maya. She wasn't like the others. She didn't fawn over his kindness or flirt with wide eyes. She asked questions, real ones. "Why'd you come here, Isaiah?" she asked one morning over burnt coffee. "You don't talk like you're from around here." Isaiah smiled tightly. "Maybe I'm just looking for something I lost." She tilted her head. "Or something you never had." Her words stuck. Maya worked 2 jobs, took care of her little brother, and didn't take nonsense from anyone. They saw more of each other. Not dates, just walks, meals, long conversations on peeling benches. Isaiah felt himself opening, which scared him more than any boardroom battle. He didn't tell her who he really was. Not yet. He needed to know she saw him, not the money, not the name. One night, after walking her home, Maya turned to him. "You're not like the others, but you've got shadows." He nodded. "So do you." She smiled. "Then maybe we'll walk in the dark together." Back in his tiny room, Isaiah stared at the ceiling. This chapter of his life wasn't about business or image. It was about truth, vulnerability, and maybe, just maybe, love. He knew the test wasn't over. Maya could still walk away when she learned the truth. But for the first time in years, Isaiah felt something powerful. Hope. Not for profits or prestige, but for connection. The kind that money could never buy. The mask was slipping. Though Isaac had spent weeks quietly observing, learning the rhythms and prejudices that pulsed beneath the surface, tonight was different. The warehouse buzzed with tension, more than usual. A late shipment had caused chaos, and managers barked orders like drill sergeants. Isaac worked beside a younger black man named Daryl, who'd been reprimanded earlier for taking an unauthorized break, despite having clocked out properly. Isaac had seen it. Everyone had. But Daryl's voice was tired. "Ain't no one gonna do nothing, man," he muttered. They just gonna ride us till we quit. That settled deep in Isaac's chest. Later, as the night dragged on and the tension simmered, a voice rang out across the floor. "Who screwed up Bay 14? It was Mason, the senior shift supervisor. Gruff, impatient, and always itching to pin the blame. All eyes turned toward Isaac. He hadn't even been near Bay 14. Mason marched toward him. "Wasn't you on packaging tonight?" Isaac straightened. "No, sir. I was stationed in Bay 7 with Daryl." Mason squinted at him, his tone sharpening. "You got a smart mouth for a temp." Daryl stepped forward. "He's right. I was with him." Mason sneered. "Then maybe you both need a reminder on accountability." The phrase hung like smoke. A reminder could mean a demotion, suspension, worse. That night, Isaac sat alone in the locker room, staring at his reflection. He could see himself clearly. Clean-shaven, jaw set, eyes sharper than they'd been in years. The weight of what he'd seen, what he'd lived under this false identity, pressed on his shoulders. This company, his company, was rotting from within. He pulled out his phone. A message draft blinked back at him. It was time. Time to begin the unmasking. Isaac's disappearance from the office was as quiet as his arrival. Word spread that the night shift security guard had quit, but no one looked deeper. That's exactly how Isaac wanted it. In the weeks that followed, he transitioned back into his executive role, monitoring every change from behind the glass walls of the top floor. He didn't come back with a roar, but with receipts. The flash drive he had amassed was handed off to a legal team and a trusted media contact. Every microaggression, every unjust emotion, every falsified report, he had it all. The evidence was irrefutable. Faces turned pale in boardrooms as footage played, recordings spoke, and logs laid bare the reality that many had refused to see. He scheduled a company-wide live stream under the guise of strategic alignment. When employees from every level tuned in, Isaac appeared on screen, not as the stoic CEO they had known, but as the same man who had walked the night halls unnoticed. And with calm, powerful clarity, he told them the truth. "I walked beside you," he said, "and I saw you, not as your employer, but as your equal." He spoke of the injustices, the divides, the systemic neglect that had been allowed to thrive under his own roof. He didn't hide from his accountability. He embraced it. And then he laid out the plan. A sweeping review of all HR and promotion decisions. The termination of key directors. Immediate diversity audits. Mandatory equity training. The creation of an internal justice council led by employees with real authority. The fallout was immediate and transformative. Some resigned, some resisted, but many wept, not because of guilt, but because they finally felt seen. Weeks later, Isaac walked the same halls, this time openly. People greeted him differently, not just as a boss, but as someone who had descended from the clouds to walk among them. But more than that, something deeper had shifted. For the first time in years, Isaac felt peace. He stood at the rooftop garden one evening, looking out at the skyline, the wind brushing his suit. Beside him stood Monica, the HR assistant who'd once left him tea at the desk, unaware of his true identity. They didn't speak much, but the silence between them was warm. He had come looking for truth. He'd found it, and something more. Not just accountability, connection, healing. Isaiah awoke before dawn, the sky outside still dark and full of silence. The unfamiliar creak of the old ceiling reminded him he wasn't in his penthouse anymore. just a rented upstairs room above the town's only bookstore, where the owners gave him a discount because he helped them unload boxes on weekends. He dressed plainly, dark jeans, boots with worn soles, and a flannel shirt that didn't quite fit. His morning ritual was humble now. No custom espresso machine. Just cheap instant coffee and filtered silence. But inside, his thoughts were louder than ever. Weeks had passed in Millstone. His cover remained intact. No one suspected he was Isaiah Green, the tech magnate who once gave a keynote at the World Business Forum. Here, he was just Zay, the soft-spoken new hire at Cartwright Hardware, good with repairs and polite to everyone. He had grown used to hauling lumber, sorting screws, fixing broken shelving. It gave his mind room to breathe. But the search, the true reason he was here, still pressed on his chest like gravity. He'd met several women in town. Polite conversations, small flirtations. But time and again, the same uneasy rhythm followed. When they asked about his past, he evaded. When they hinted at the future, he stalled. He was terrified, not of rejection, but of false acceptance. Then came Ayanna. She worked part-time at the small community center, tutoring kids in math and science. She didn't dress for attention. She didn't speak to impress. But her presence was grounding. She looked at people the way a scientist looked at stars, like something to understand, not control. Their first real conversation wasn't flirtation. It was debate. Isaiah had offered to fix a broken heater at the center. Ayanna said, "No, people come here for warmth," she told him, arms folded. "Not just heat. Let them know you care, not that they owe you." Isaiah, taken aback, smiled. No one had spoken to him like that in years. They began meeting more often. Long walks, late-night talks, neither rushing. She asked questions, not about his job, not about where he lived, but about what made him angry, or what made him laugh as a kid. For the first time in years, he answered truthfully, but the lie, his hidden identity, started to eat at him. One afternoon, Ayanna brought him a homemade sandwich during his shift at the hardware store. He smiled, deeply touched, but inside he felt like a fraud. Could she love him if she knew the truth? Could she forgive the test he'd placed her in unknowingly? He went home that night, stood in front of the mirror, and stared for a long time. The mask of humility, the layers of false modesty, the small-town clothes, none of them could hide the ache in his chest. Not from himself. He knew what had to come next. The truth, raw, unfiltered, terrifying. He wasn't just risking her trust. He was risking the first real connection he'd felt in years. And still, he decided he would tell her. Mariah didn't respond right away. Her face betrayed nothing, but her eyes shimmered. Anger, maybe. Or the tremble of something else. Something scarier than rage. Hope. Later that day, after the town hall had emptied, and the whispers faded into the quiet lull of late afternoon, Isaac found her sitting on the old swing set behind the community center. She didn't look up when he approached. The rusted chains creaked as she gently pushed herself back and forth. "I was going to leave," she said softly. "Pack up and go before you could say anything else." "Why didn't you?" he asked. She shrugged. "Maybe I wanted to see if you'd chase me. Maybe I wanted to see if the man you pretended to be was closer to the real you than the man with the penthouse view." Isaac sat on the ground near her feet. The man with the penthouse was lost. I didn't even know how lonely I was until the silence got louder than the applause. The wind stirred around them. Mariah stopped swinging. "You hurt me," she said. "I know. You made me think maybe I could trust again. Then I found out you'd been lying the whole time. I didn't lie about us. I didn't lie about how I felt. But you didn't give me the choice to know you. You chose for me." I did, and I regret it. For a long time, she just looked at him. Then she stood up, dusted off her jeans, and extended her hand. "Come on," she said. "You owe me a walk." They walked in silence, past the church, past the diner, down the gravel road that led to the small creek where she'd once told him stories of her childhood. The sunset bled into the water like spilled wine. She stood there for a moment, then turned to him. "I don't care about your money, Isaac. I care about who you are when no one's watching. That's the man I fell for. I just need to know he's not an illusion." Isaac reached for her hand. "Then let me show you. Every day, if you'll let me." And for the first time in weeks, Mariah smiled, not out of politeness or habit, but out of something real. The morning air in Cedar Falls carried a hush of anticipation. Paper lanterns swayed lazily in the trees along the riverbank. White chairs, lined in neat rows, faced an arbor wrapped in wildflowers and ivy. No velvet ropes, no paparazzi, just a creek, a field, and the hum of community. Isaac adjusted the simple boutonniere pinned to his vest. No tuxedo, no designer labels, just linen, a steady heart, and hands that had rebuilt more than just a life. He stood under the arbor, breathing in the moment, watching townspeople he once knew only as strangers, now friends, smile at him like family. Mariah appeared in the distance, walking barefoot across the grass. Her dress was light, flowing, untouched by extravagance. Her curls danced in the breeze, and her eyes found his. Every step she took was the closing of a chapter and the beginning of another. She had chosen him, not for legacy or fortune, but for the man who sat beside her on broken swings and walked gravel roads just to hear her laugh. As she reached him, Isaac whispered, This is the only empire I ever needed." And with the rustle of the trees and the river as their witness, Isaac Cole finally found everything he had searched for. Not in power, but in peace. Not in wealth, but in love.